I am a firm believer in don't call yourself a doctor unless you can write a prescription, but thank you very much for that. You're here tonight for a session, Rupert, which is talking to Tehran. And I imagine for a number of you, the big looming question is, will the United States bomb Iran's nuclear facilities if diplomacy and sanctions fail? Throughout the nuclear crisis with Iran, the Bush administration has sent a mixed message. Officials have stuck to their now familiar mantra: all options are on the table. But the question is, to what end? What's the objective? Is the U.S. objective to change the policies of Iran, or is it to change Iran's ruling regime? This unresolved contradiction, regime change or behavior change, is the focus of my new book. And before summarizing its main findings, let me tell you why I wrote it. This book is a successor to one I wrote in 2000 titled, which was Rogue States and U.S. Foreign Policy. That book emerged from my experience working on the National Security Council staff when the term rogue state entered the U.S. foreign policy lexicon in the mid-1990s. And when I went back to the Woodrow Wilson Center, I wanted to write a book. Where did this term come from? How did it get translated into policy? And what were the contradictions that resulted from that process? The book was a tough critique. It argued that the term rogue state was politically selective, essentially applied against states that were hostile to the United States, that the term had no standing in international law. But even more significantly, lumping and demonizing a disparate group of states ranging from Cuba and Libya to North Korea and Iran distorted our understanding of those states and distorted policy. It led to a one-size-fits-all strategy. And U.S. policies ran up to hard realities. In 1994, when we had to pragmatically engage North Korea because the North Koreans were on the verge of a nuclear breakout, that engagement was castigated by hardliners as appeasement. So the term, the whole mental construct of the rogue state, just eliminated or greatly reduced the political space for pragmatically dealing with the problems that these countries present. And they are they're tough cases. These are real problems, and the rogue state categorization got in the way of it. Now, that book in Washington policy term got traction. It was pushing on an open door. The Clinton administration realized that the term had become a political straitjacket, and they ditched it in terms and replaced it with the infelicitous phrase, states of concern. A phrase that a psychiatrist friend of mine tells me we're all perpetually in. But in any case, administration chose for it. The Bush administration, ever true to form, revived the term when it took office in 2001 under its general ABC, anything but Clinton approach to foreign policy. But the impetus for my new treatment of the rogue state issue were the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. And this leads me to the first of 3 points I'd like to make. 9/11 led to a fundamental redefinition of the threat. The Bush administration in its 2002 National Security Strategy document argued explicitly that the threat derives from the very character of our adversaries. Unpredictable rogue states and undeterrable terrorist groups. It argued that the rogue states were less susceptible to deterrence. You couldn't rely on deterrence in dealing with them. And more ominously, the rogue states might transfer a nuclear or other unconventional capability to a terrorist group, which are emphatically undeterrable and would use them against the United States. So that redefinition of the threat leads to my second point, which is 9/11 led to a redefinition of strategy. And the Bush administration shifted its focus from the pre-9/11 emphasis on deterrence and containment, the subtitle of my first book was Containment After the Cold War, to a focus on changing the regimes, because it argued explicitly that behavior change would not get you there, because the behavior is inextricably linked to the character of the regimes. So if you want to change the behavior, you have to change the regimes. Now, in tandem with that change in orientation was the change in policy. The emphasis, you'll recall, on military preemption, the use of force against imminent threats. But the Bush administration went beyond that, controversially, and outside of international law in arguing that it would use force preventively against emerging threats. And that led to the Iraq intervention, which Iraq did not pose an imminent threat. It was a dormant threat from the 1990s. But Donald Rumsfeld used the phrase, we now view the world through the prism of 9/11, which I took as the subtitle of my new book. Because in a 9/11 perspective, where a rogue state might transfer weapons to a terrorist group, Iraq had to be dealt with. The administration, after the fall of toppling the Baghdad regime, called Iraq a type. That was a word used by a senior official. It was a type, a new type of non-proliferation, coercive non-proliferation, based on changing regimes. President Bush said in an April 2003 speech that the United States had redefined war. It was now capable of decapitating regimes through shock and awe, but without inflicting unacceptable collateral damage on the civilian population. This was the new model. And during the time of this Iranian initiative that Barbara spoke about in spring 2003, a senior official was, we'll call him Mr. X, Mr. former Undersecretary of State John X, who told us that the lesson of the Iraq War for Iran was, quote unquote, take the number. 8 months after the toppling of Baghdad, a different, an alternative non-proliferation precedent was set when Libya made the surprise announcement that it was going to verifiably disarm and dismantle its unconventional weapons programs. Now this initiative had a long lineage. The British really brought it to the Americans. They saw it through. To its credit, the Bush administration followed through on it. But the lesson that they drew from the Libyan announcement and the way in which it was portrayed was that the Libyan deal was a dividend of the Iraq War. That Gaddafi had been, as they put it, scared straight because he might be next. But in my research, and based on interviews, it's clear, or so I argue, that the crux of the deal was a security assurance, a tacit but clear assurance to the Gaddafi regime that if he gave up his unconventional weapons programs, the United States would fall off of regime change as its objective. In other words, it would accept a change in Libyan policies in return for taking the regime change question off the table. So you have these two precedents. In Iraq, non-proliferation through a change of regime. In Libya, non-proliferation through a change within a regime. These two precedents have clear implications for dealing with the current Iranian case. And this leads me to my third point, because I talked about how 9/11 led to a change of the definition of threat. Secondly, how it led to a redefinition of strategy as implemented in Iraq. And thirdly, this unresolved contradiction that defines U.S. policy right now in dealing with countries like Iran and North Korea. Is our objective to change the regimes, or is our objective to change their policies? Has led to incoherent policies. And a number of implications flow from that. One, Barbara touched on it. She's written a marvelous book about it. We've missed opportunities. 2003, she's talked about that. Because you don't have to be Thucydides or Henry Kissinger to figure out that if you've taken down the Taliban and you've taken down the man with all the lip service paid Israel, who killed and wounded 1 million Iranians, next door, Saddam Hussein, that there was some basis for a strategic dialogue with Iran. But instead, the attitude was take a number. But the second point I'd like to emphasize, and really this is kind of the main theme of the main point I'd like to make tonight, is that the unresolved contradiction, the ambiguity on the U.S. side about what our objective is, this regime change or behavior change question, creates an incentive for Iran to cultivate ambiguity about the status of its capabilities and about its nuclear intentions. That the ambiguity on one side feeds into the ambiguity of the other side. Now, the United States has basically three options in dealing with Iran, as we did with North Korea. Bluntly put, without getting into poli-sci jargon, which I eschew at all times.